Coming up on this Friday edition of Newsline at noon, former head of the National Tax Agency Jeon Goon-pyo has been arrested for allegedly accepting bribes from the CJ Group, while the food and entertainment conglomerate was under a tax evasion probe. Seoul lodges a formal complaint against Tokyo's public survey on Korea's Dokdo islets. This is just the latest in a string of historical denials and territorial claims that have sparked anger in East Asia. Plus, following news Russia has granted U.S. whistleblower Edward Snowden 1-year asylum, Washington says it's re-evaluating the worth of an upcoming summit between the U.S. and Russia. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
Where's the best place for bibimbap?
Les Jeux Olympiques d'hiver se dérouleront-ils à Pyeongchang?
هل أنتم حقاً سابع أكبر مصدر في العالم؟
この歌手は誰ですか？你好，最近哪部电视剧的人气最旺？
Korea is attracting interest from around the world. The more you know, the more you want to know. Dynamic Korea.
Good to have you with us. You're watching Newsline at noon. I'm Chi Yusan in Seoul.
Yes, very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. We kick things off with the latest scandal destroying trust in the nation's public officials. Prosecutors are seeking an arrest warrant for former Tax Office Chief Jeon Goon-pyo on charges of receiving bribes from CJ Group in 2006.
He is accused of accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash from the food and entertainment conglomerate in return for favors. Hwang Jie has the details.
Prosecutors sought an arrest warrant for former tax chief Jeon Goon-pyo on Friday over allegations he took gifts from CJ Group for favors during a tax audit. Jeon was arrested earlier Friday, but in Korea, prosecutors must seek an arrest warrant to detain a suspect for more than 48 hours. Following 14 hours of intensive questioning, local reports say the ex-commissioner of the National Tax Service admitted accepting money and goods but denied it was in return for favors or abuse of his authority. Jeon is under suspicion of receiving $300,000 and luxury watches from the local food and entertainment conglomerate in 2006, just after he was named commissioner of the tax office. During an audit into CJ Group in 2006, tax authorities obtained evidence the group dodged some $300 million in corporate and income taxes. The nation's tax office, however, did not levy any penalty on the conglomerate. Prosecutors believe CJ Group bribed Jeon and his former deputy Heo Byung-ik in exchange for not auditing the group. Heo, who is now in custody, claims he had only passed on the bribes to Jeon. The probe into the former tax chief comes at a time when the National Tax Service is going to great lengths to shake off its image as a corrupt and untrustworthy agency. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Turning now to Tokyo's latest claim to the Korea-controlled Dokdo islets. The Japanese government has released the results of its first ever survey on how the Japanese people view Dokdo. Korea has brushed off the findings, saying they are meaningless. Our Hwang Sung-hee has more.
Japan claims about 6 out of 10 Japanese regard the Korea-controlled Dokdo islets as their territory. In an attempt to renew its claims over Korea's easternmost islets, the Japanese government released on Thursday the findings of its first ever survey on the public awareness of Dokdo, known as Takeshima in Japan. According to the survey, 95% of the respondents said they knew the islets. Around 63% of this group said the islets are being unlawfully occupied by Korea, and 62% said the islets are part of Japan's Shimane prefecture. 61% said Dokdo is Japanese territory in terms of history and international law. South Korea's foreign ministry lodged an official protest against Japan on Thursday, summoning a high-level official from the Japanese embassy in Seoul. The ministry said the survey is just another form of Japan's unjustified claims over Dokdo, which is historically, geographically, and by international law rightfully Korean territory. Dokdo has long been a thorn in Seoul-Tokyo relations, with Japan continuously laying claim to the islet through various channels, including school textbooks and government reports. The controversial survey is the latest in a string of historically insensitive remarks made by Japan. Earlier this week, Japanese Deputy Prime Minister Taro Aso was heavily criticized for his remarks that Japan learned from Nazi Germany's constitutional reform. Just over 2 months ago, Osaka Mayor Toru Hashimoto claimed military sexual slavery during World War II was necessary for keeping Japanese troops in order. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
To counter the threats from North Korea while strengthening its nuclear umbrella for its ally in South Korea, the United States is planning to beef up security in the Western Pacific by stationing additional B-52 bombers in Guam. Our Yurian has more.
The head of the U.S. Air Force Global Strike Command, Lieutenant General James Kowalski, says the United States is planning to station at least 6 nuclear-capable B-52 strategic bombers at Andersen Air Force Base in Guam to strengthen security in the Western Pacific region, including the Korean Peninsula. Speaking at a National Defense Industrial Association seminar in Washington, Kowalski also said the deployment of the B-52 bombers is part of the U.S. Air Force's continuous bomber presence program, and the 6 bombers will be rotated every 6 months. The bombers will be on standby at Andersen, which is a key strategic point in the Western Pacific. The base is one of the 4 forward deployment strategic bases in the Air Force and is in charge of the Western Pacific, including the Korean Peninsula. The B-52 is a strategic bomber that's equipped with nuclear bombs, precision-guided munitions, and conventional bombs. Yurian, Arirang News.
A senior U.S. official met with a group of Korean-American community leaders at the White House on Thursday, where he fired some strong messages to North Korea. Han Da-eun has more on Washington's latest comments towards Pyongyang.
North Korea's tried and tested strategy of coming between South Korea and the U.S. to get what it wants won't work anymore. This was the message from Sidney Seiler, the Korea policy chief at the U.S. National Security Council. During a meeting at the White House with a group of Korean-American community leaders Thursday, Seiler said Seoul and Washington have built close and transparent ties over the last 4 years through the Lee Myung-bak and Park Geun-hye administrations, adding the two countries' strong alliance means Pyongyang's attempts to disrupt the relationship won't work. He also warned the reclusive state to be aware of that if it wants further negotiations with the U.S. Seiler also pointed out that inter-Korean relations will not improve without the North's efforts to denuclearize. And likewise, the official said, it's hard to imagine an improvement in Washington-Pyongyang relations or progress toward peace talks, while North Korea continues to refuse to talk about the shuttered inter-Korean Kaesong industrial complex. He added the U.S. is also in close talks with China and Russia over North Korea's nuclear issue. The U.S. official pointed out that following Pyongyang's series of provocative acts in recent months, the consensus is widening among members of the international community, including the 6-party members, that the North's nuclear program should not be tolerated. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
For your fill of Korean and international news. Join Chae Yu-sun and Mark Broom every weekday at lunchtime. Newsline at noon.
Plenary session this Wednesday and vote on the government restructuring bills.
Edward Snowden, the former CIA worker wanted by the U.S. for leaking its secret surveillance program, has been granted asylum in Russia for 1 year. It brings to an end his weeks-long limbo in the transit area of a Moscow airport. Washington, meanwhile, is less than impressed with Moscow's decision. Our Kim Young-gil reports.
He is one of the most wanted men in the world, but for the next 12 months at least, Edward Snowden has legal permission to live and possibly even work in Russia. With a permit, he is safely out of the reach of American prosecutors and ends more than a month of legal limbo at Moscow's main airport. Unsurprisingly, Moscow's decision has infuriated Washington.
We are extremely disappointed that the Russian government would take this step despite our very clear and lawful requests in public and in private to have Mr. Snowden expelled to the United States to face the charges against him.
A spokesperson for the Kremlin said Thursday that the decision was not made by President Vladimir Putin but by Russian immigration officials. Snowden's father thanked Russia for granting his son temporary asylum.
I am again thankful to the Russian people, President Vladimir Putin and Anatoly Kucherena for the courage, the strength, the humanity that they have demonstrated in what I believe is this noble action of protecting my son and keeping him safe.
Snowden's father said he plans to visit his son in Russian capital soon. Edward Snowden was not caught on camera leaving the airport Thursday, but his lawyer said he left by himself in a regular taxi. Extremely disappointed by the news, Washington says it will reconsider an upcoming summit between U.S. President Barack Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin in September. Kim Hyung-gil, Arirang News.
The best tonic for the Eurozone's economic woes seems to be more of the same, as the European Central Bank has held its key interest rate steady at record low level of 0.5%. Speaking after the bank's decision was announced on Thursday, ECB President Mario Draghi said the Eurozone's economy is gradually recovering, but growth risks remain on the downside. Draghi reiterated that the interest rate would stay at its current level or even lower for the foreseeable future. Analysts say Draghi wants to reassure markets that the ECB does not intend to follow the U.S. Federal Reserve's plans to taper off its stimulus program. More signs the U.S. economy is on the road to recovery as factory activity jumped to a two-year high last month, and first-time applications for unemployment benefits slid to a 5.5-year low last week, signaling a pickup in manufacturing. The index of national factory activity rose to 55.4 from 50.9 in June. Anything over 50 means the sector is growing. Initial claims for unemployment benefits tumbled by 19,000 to 326,000 last week. This is the lowest figure recorded since January of 2008. U.S. stocks responded well, with the S&P 500 jumping 1.25% Thursday to top the 1,700 mark for the first time ever.
Just a few days before the inauguration of Iran's new President Hassan Rouhani, the U.S. House of Representatives has passed a bill sanctioning Iran over its nuclear program. The measure would considerably cut Iran's oil exports, penalize countries importing Iranian oil, and further limit Tehran's access to overseas financial accounts. Next, the bill must pass in the Senate in September. President-elect Rouhani, who will be sworn in on Sunday, is considered more moderate than his predecessors. And in related news, North Korea's head of parliament, Kim Yong-nam, is currently in Iran to attend the inauguration. Now to the case that shocked and sickened the US and the world. The Ohio man who kidnapped and imprisoned 3 young women for over a decade and raped them repeatedly has been sentenced to life in prison without parole plus 1,000 years. Speaking at his sentencing Thursday, he said he was sorry for his actions but insisted that he is not a monster. Connie Lee reports.
Ariel Castro, wearing an orange jumpsuit with his hands and feet cuffed, entered the courtroom for his sentencing. The 53-year-old Ohio man who abducted, imprisoned, and raped 3 young women for more than a decade in his home was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 1,000 years.
Don't deserve to be out in our community. You're too dangerous because in your mind, you're a victim, again, as opposed to those who actually did suffer the victimization.
In his final statement to the court, Castro said he was sorry for his actions, but showed no remorse.
What I'm trying to get is that these people are trying to paint me as a monster, and I'm not a monster. I'm sick.
Earlier in the hearing, prosecutors presented graphic details of the crimes, including a replica of the house where Castro imprisoned the women in the basement. It was last week when Castro pled guilty to hundreds of criminal charges, including murder, for beating and starving one of his victims when she was pregnant, causing her to miscarry 5 times. On the day of his sentencing, the victim, 32-year-old Michelle Knight, read a statement saying that Castro made her life miserable since the day he abducted her in 2002.
You took 11 years of my life away, and I have got it back. I spent 11 years in hell.
The former school bus driver is also guilty of kidnapping 2 other young women, Amanda Berry and Gina De Jesus, in Cleveland between 2002 and 2004. He also fathered a child, now 6 years old, with Berry. After years of searching for the women, who were all in their 20s when they went missing, they were finally found on May 6th after Berry escaped and found neighbors who then called the police. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Italy's Supreme Court has upheld a jail sentence against former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi for tax fraud. Wrapping up a 3-day hearing on Thursday, the court's 5 judges turned down Berlusconi's final appeal against a verdict handed down by 2 lower courts. The earlier verdict sentenced the billionaire media mogul to 4 years in prison, commuted to 1 year under amnesty. The judges say they'll review another part of the sentence, a 5-year ban on Berlusconi running for or holding public office. In a video message released after the verdict, Berlusconi once again proclaimed his innocence and slammed the courts for hounding him for the last 2 decades. Watchers say Berlusconi will likely serve his sentence through community service or under house arrest because of his age.
The Incheon International Airport is bustling with people setting off for a vacation, but it's not just people who are jetting off. Most vacationers are taking their beloved animals with them, with airlines offering special care on the journey. Our Song Ji-sun tells us more.
You no longer have to leave your pets behind or ask someone to look after them when going on vacation. Data shows 2,000 travelers out of Korea took their pets with them on their travels in the first half of this year, up 12% from a year earlier. Pet owners are generally charged up to 10% of the passenger fare when flying long distance, like to the US or Europe. When the animal is small, weighing under 5 kilograms, they can go in the cabin with their owners, but those exceeding the weight limit must be carried in the cargo. But don't worry, because even in cargo, pets are well taken care of.
When transporting pets like dogs, we load them in a lower deck, in a sector called bulk, when we can control the temperature according to the animal.
These highly valuable race horses require special care. The air temperature needs to be maintained at 13 degrees Celsius, and the floor has to be sprinkled with wood shavings. In the case of dolphins, they're put in a custom-made box filled with water, with the temperature maintained between 15 to 19 degrees Celsius. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
The 2013 Istanbul Gyeongju World Culture Expo will kick off in Turkey later this month. A host of exciting events and performances are set to showcase the best of Korean culture. And Na Hyung-kyung gives us a sneak peek of the festivities.
Istanbul's landmark Hagia Sophia stands proudly over the city square. And it's here in the economic and historical heart of Turkey where the Istanbul Gyeongju World Cultural Expo will soon be held under the theme of Road, Encounter and Companion. The National Orchestra of Korea will be featuring performances of traditional Korean instruments, while the Cheongdong Theater Foundation is scheduled to perform classic musicals.
We plan to show aspects of the Shilla dynasty and our radiant culture. It'll also be a chance to boast Korea's IT technology. We'll demonstrate both traditional and modern culture.
A Silk Road expedition is currently making its way from China to the opening ceremony in Istanbul along the historic trade routes that once linked Europe to the Far East. The expedition aims to attract international attention for the expo and act as a cultural exchange. A 1.2-kilometer-long Kilnori parade is expected to attract some 1 million people to Taksim Square on September 1st. Meanwhile, K-pop concerts, Korean film festivals, taekwondo demonstrations, and many other events will celebrate the popularity of the Korean wave.
In order to convey the very essence of DNA of Korea, we plan to focus on showcasing our unique culture. In addition, since this expo cannot be purely event-driven, the Institute of Korean Studies will be hosting special seminars on our traditional and social culture.
The expo will run for 23 days starting at the end of August, providing the stage for Korea and Turkey to strengthen their deep cultural and historical roots. 나현경, Arirang News.
Second and third generation Koreans from several different nations close the curtain on their 11-day cultural and historical journey through Korea. While their send-off proved to be emotional, they'll each be returning home with something that will last a lifetime, a better understanding of their heritage. Kim Yeon-bin, who followed the entire tour, brings us this report.
80 Koreans with different backgrounds and nationalities have been traveling around Korea with a purpose: to learn more about their heritage. They were here on an 11-day trip, visiting key cultural and historical sites around the country. But, like all good things, the trip had to come to an end sometime. Even after just a few days together, great bonds were formed, and saying goodbye was difficult.
I met some great friends and felt a sense of unity. It's too soon to part.
It's hard to say. I wish I was here for another week just to go through the same experience all over again.
During the tour, participants visited the demilitarized zone, major battlefield sites from the Korean War, and even got to experience the Korean-style boot camp, where many felt culture shock firsthand.
Well, since we're from America, we don't really share showers, and we're not used to seeing guys nude, so we're having a little trouble here.
Most of the young people are heading back to their countries now, but they are not leaving empty-handed.
11 short days might not mean much for just teenagers, who have their whole lives in front of them. But they did learn one thing, the true meaning of being Korean, which will last a lifetime. Kim Yeon-bin, Arirang News.
Well, let's now get an update on the weather with our weathercaster Lee Ji-yeon standing by at the Weather Center here at Arirang. Good afternoon to you, Ji-yeon.
Good afternoon and happy Friday, guys. Now, this weekend, there are a lot of fun festivals going on across the nation. There are 2 international rock festivals, Magic Festival in Busan, and the Tomato Festival in Gangwon, and a lot more.
Tomato Festival, that sounds interesting. Can you tell us more about it?
Of course, the event kicked off today in Hwacheon in Gangwon province, and it will continue until this Sunday. It's filled with fun events, and one of which is producing enough tomato sauce for spaghetti for 1,000 people.
1,000 people, wow. It's funny you mention it because I've actually been to that tomato
really?
festival. It's a lot of fun. But can you tell us what the weather's going to be like down there for visitors?
Of course. Well, the Hwacheon is expected to receive a bit of rain on and off on the weekends, and temperature will be hovering in the upper 20s, so weather shouldn't keep you from the festival over there. Now, today, the rest of the country will receive passing showers throughout the day, but some of the inland regions could get up to 70 millimeters of rain, especially in the mountains, and that means water levels in the valleys could rise quickly, so be careful if you're there. Now, we have rain on tap for Saturday with low clouds sticking around in Seoul and the surrounding areas, and the rain will let up before noon, but it should be back on Sunday, and it's likely to linger till early next week. Now, down south, it will be mostly sunny with a few passing clouds. Well, right now, we definitely have more clouds than this morning, dropping a bit of rain in some regions, and the humidity this afternoon will be 85% on average. So with that, let's take a closer look at today's readings. Now, Seoul and Gwangju will get up to 31 and 32 degrees Celsius, while Busan gets up to 29. Now, let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju will have a lot of sunshine, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang will be climbing up to 25. Now, that's all for Korea, and here's the global forecast for viewers around the world. Now that's all for me this week. Now I hope you have a great rest of the day and wonderful weekend. Back to you, Yusun and Mark in the studio.
Well, thank you very much, Jeon. You have a wonderful weekend too, and you have a wonderful weekend too, Yusun.
You too, Mark.
And this brings us to the end of our show today.
Join us again next Monday at noon right here in Seoul.